looks like we're live. Hello and welcome everyone. Welcome to Adobe Creative Cloud. My name is Terry White, and today we're going to be talking about ways to customize Photoshop CC, but more importantly, Photoshop CC's interface to your liking. So that means that you'll be able to basically change some attributes about Photoshop, many of which you probably have seen in the past and many of which you may not have seen if you haven't looked closer. So thank you, Evil Cerise. You're always on your game by moderating on our channels, and thank you for that. And thanks for also for the sound check of loud and clear. Okay, like I said, we're going to be talking about the Photoshop interface, and I could wait for everyone to get in the room, but then we'd just be waiting. So why don't I get to it? If you missed the beginning, you can of course always go back and watch the replay once the stream is over. All right, so with that said, let's pop over to the computer. Hey, Victoria, I see you over there on YouTube. And I'm going to start off with the way Photoshop would present itself if you were like using it for the first time. Of course, the only difference is you wouldn't have all the recent documents that I have, but this is the way the new welcome screen looks. You can, of course, open an existing document. If you see one there in your recents that you want to open, you can of course do it that way. You can also go in and create a new document. I just want to point this out just in case people missed it in the past. When you create a new document, you now have several free templates to work with. And the templates are organized by categories like photo, print, art, and illustration, web, mobile, and film and video. So if I were looking to make a new print design and I didn't want to start from scratch, even starting from scratch with a photo, I can always just download one of these free templates, insert my photos and text into them, and away I go. And these are always updated because I'm seeing some ones here right now that I hadn't seen since the last time I looked. So that is from the new welcome screen. Now, of course, once you open a photo, then you're into regular Photoshop. You don't see that welcome screen anymore until there is no document open. For some people, they love the new welcome screen. For other people, they don't like the new welcome screen. So I thought that would be one of the first easy things to show you is how you would be able to turn this off if you chose not to have it. If you go to your Photoshop preferences and you go under General, there are two that you can turn off. There's Show Start Workspace when no documents are open. I usually have that turned off when I'm on my own production machine when I'm not training. And Show Recent Files in Workspace when opening a new file. So that is kind of like that one, but you can turn either one or both of these off. It's up to you. I kind of like the recent files, but I'm going to turn it off for now. So now when I click OK, and then some of these might require a reboot of Photoshop. That means in order for the preference to take effect, you'd have to restart Photoshop in order to see the change. But we can try it here. I can try opening a document, closing it again, and yeah, so it's the welcome screen still there, which means I'd have to quit out of Photoshop, and then when I relaunch it, that screen wouldn't be there anymore. All right, but let's go ahead and open up a document, and let's get into some more preferences. I'm going to save one of my favorites for last, but let's say that I want to add a couple more documents or a couple more layers into this document. So I could, for example, go to my Creative Cloud library there. I just had it open a second ago. Let's open up a couple more documents there, or let's just drag a couple of these in. So let's drag this one in. And let's, and of course we can go ahead and commit to that. Let's drag another one in. Everybody's going to be watching the eclipse, hopefully, one way or the other on Monday, if you're in the US area. Drag that one in. So now I'm creating these layers. So, okay, 3 is enough. I don't need more than that for this. And typically what you would see in the layers panel is just this. You would see the layer, you would see the name of the layer, you would see whether or not it's a background or if it's locked, and you would see if the layer is visible or not. But you can also change if this display is not to your liking, if you don't like the way that the thumbnails look, meaning they're too small or too big, or you don't want the thumbnails at all, which I can't imagine that, but some people might not want them. There's a flyout menu on the right of the layers panel, that little 3-line menu there, or 4-line menu there. If you just click that, you can go into, all the way at the bottom, the panel options. And many of the panels have options for customization. So if I go to the panel options, look at what I can do. I can change the size of my thumbnails. Or I could say none and have no visible thumbnails there for my layers. So if I make them nice and big, click OK, I've got nice big thumbnails. Now you'll notice that the one for the Eclipse shows a lot of blank space around it, because that's showing basically if these layers were turned off, I would have all that blank space around it because the other space is being used up mainly by the background. One of those options, here, let me go see if I can make that happen. Let's go back to panel options. One of those options is to use the thumbnail contents will just be the layer bounds or the entire document. If I say layer bounds and click OK, notice what it did. It's not showing me that extra white space again. And why that's important is because what if it's something really tiny on the layer on a giant empty layer? The rest of the layer is empty. The thumbnail would be of no use to you. You wouldn't even be able to see what it is. So this way you can at least see everything that's on the layer taking up the full thumbnail, even though that's not representing the space around it. And that might help you, that might make the difference, especially when you got a lot of layers, of finding something that, oh my God, it's so tiny, I can't see what they are. Now you see exactly what's on every layer because it fills up the entire icon. All right, so that might be a change you might want to make. Even if you don't go with the super large thumbnails, I can still go back down to maybe the normal size, but now again, those icons are being taken up by the image itself. Okay, another one while we're here, and this is kind of a hidden one, is when you have a lot of layers and you want to quickly be able to identify certain kinds, you can customize the color of the layer. I'm not talking about what's on the layer, I'm talking about in the layers panel itself. So if I right click on a layer, you notice all these colors down here at the bottom. You got color labels for your layer. So if I say red, for example, now that layer has a red icon next to it, and if I go to this one and make that one green, for example, now that one has a green icon next to it. So I could make my own methodology for what's all the green layers for, what are all the red layers for, what are all the purple layers for. Maybe all my purple layers are text. Maybe all my red layers are vectors. Maybe all my green layers are people. You know, whatever it is you come up with, you can then quickly identify not only what the layers are, but what purpose they serve in your document. Okay, hello Nelly Belly, hi as well. Thanks for sharing that on Twitter. Let's see, would be perfect if you could open multiple files at the same time from the welcome screen. That is a good suggestion, Kevin. I will take that back to the team. And hello, William Phillips in Ireland. Glad you followed me. Hello, Renee. And people in the UK. All right, continuing on. Speaking of color, and this is one that I didn't really realize was there for a long time. Let's go to the edit menu. And let's come down to menus. Now, of course, you can customize keyboard shortcuts. And ooh, I should have added that to my list, but I didn't. You can customize keyboard shortcuts. Maybe we'll come back to that one. And let's go to menus first. Of course, this will show all of the menus you have in Photoshop by their names at the top. So file, edit, image, so forth and so on. And if you twirl it down, then you can see what's under that menu. And these will be the things under the menu. Well, first and foremost, you can have the ability to turn them on or off, just things that you never use. You never, ever, ever, ever use the, maybe you never, ever use the close option. So that option's visible. Or you never use close all, or you never use close and go to bridge. I would never use close and go to bridge. So I could turn that off. The other thing you can do is, I've already done it for the save menu, but let's do it for save as. You can also colorize your menu items. What does that do? When I click OK, and I go up to File now, I don't have to hunt down the menu for the things I use the most. They're right there in bright colors jumping out at me. So A, I can get rid of things I don't use. B, the things that I use the most, I can color and say, oh yeah, hey, Scott Belsky's in the house, man, what's going on? I can quickly get down and colorize the things that I want. So save as are now green and purple, so that way I can quickly get to the things I need. And of course, turning off the things I never, ever use is also extremely helpful. All right, so let's see, we talked about that. Well, while we mention that item, let me go ahead and go to it, because this has come up in the past, I just never think about it. Keyboard shortcuts and menus is actually the same set of options here. It brought me back to the same spot. When you go to a menu item, actually no, it's not, I'm sorry, it's not the same unless okay, never mind. When you go to a menu option, you will see, I should say the interface looks the same. You will see the keyboard shortcuts for any item that is in the menu that has a keyboard shortcut. If you, for example, always do artboards to PDF and you want a keyboard shortcut for artboards to PDF, you can make one. You can click in there and hit whatever keyboard shortcut combination you want. Here's the gotcha though. I doubt if you're going to come up with very many keyboard shortcuts that haven't already been used for something. In other words, if I do, let's see, Command Option Shift A for artboards or Command Option Shift P for PDF. Here, let me try it. Command Option Shift P for PDF. See, I get a warning. It's telling me that that's already in use for print one copy. Now, I got a choice. I can either say, I don't care, make mine the one, make mine the one that will be for artboards to PDF, or I can bail out of this and say, no, don't change it. That one's important. It's, like I said, it's going to be rare that you're going to come up with a keyboard shortcut that isn't already in use, but if it is in use and it creates a conflict, you'll get that warning and you can go resolve that conflict by choosing which one of the things that keyboard shortcut is going to work for. So the other item may not get a keyboard shortcut anymore. So for example, what was the conflict again? Print one copy. Maybe I never print, so I don't need to have a keyboard shortcut for that. So I wouldn't care if that one didn't have one anymore. So you can, again, customize the keyboard shortcuts for whatever you want, even if they already exist, and override that and make it your own set. And there are also, by the way, when I speak of sets, there are keyboard defaults. So right now, because I made a change, I'm on the Photoshop defaults modified, and I can make additional sets of keyboard shortcuts that I switch to for whatever I want. So your choice. I'm going to go back to the regular defaults, don't save my changes, and put everything back to the way it was. And matter of fact, I'll just cancel out of it. Okay, so keyboard shortcuts can be customized. Anything that doesn't have a keyboard shortcut can be added, or ones that have shortcuts can be changed. But keep in mind, most likely you will have conflicts. In other words, every possible keyboard shortcut's already in use, for the most part. All right, let's talk about panels and custom workspaces. All right, and this is one that I use a lot. I've been using this pretty much since Photoshop has had custom workspaces. And that is the ability. It's now hidden under this little square. It used to be like the name of the workspace would be spelled out, but now they're all kind of buried under here. And for example, I've got a workspace called Terry White. And that workspace basically just puts the panels on that I use in the order I use them on. These, the ones in this next category, are the ones that come with Photoshop. So Essentials is the one I believe it defaults to for new users. You can switch to the 3D workspace, which puts up all the 3D stuff when you're working with 3D, so forth and so on. Graphic design and web, motion, painting, and photography. So for example, if I were to switch it, mine is probably very similar to photography. So let me see what happens. If I switch to photography, yeah, it switches a little bit. If I switch it to 3D, it probably switches a lot. And if I switch it to graphic and web design, switches a little bit more. So in other words, whatever I'm doing can give me the best possible workspace by just bringing up all the panels I'm going to need, turning off the stuff I'm not going to need, and giving me the best of both worlds. Now, since I do a lot of retouching, we're going to make a new workspace. I'm going to start with Terry White. And we're going to make a new workspace, and we're going to call it retouching. And when I make my retouching workspace, now, you know what? Before I do it, before I actually go make it, maybe I should bring up the things I'm going to want. So let's do that first. I want my layers panels. I don't need the paths panel. Usually when I'm retouching, I can turn that one off. I like my histogram. I like my navigator. I like my adjustments panel. I like my layers panel. Maybe I want my, let's see, some of these other ones. Yeah, I could maybe use properties. Maybe I'll use the info panel. I'll definitely use color and swatches. I'll definitely use brushes. Clone source, yeah, sure, why not? Character, paragraph, I pretty much use all of these, but maybe I don't use layer comps. So let's go ahead and get rid of that one. And maybe I definitely don't use notes. So let's get rid of that one. And that's an extension. And I don't use device preview when I'm retouching. Let's get rid of that one. Okay, so I got basically Photoshop down to the panels I work with. But there's one more new thing that a lot of users don't realize. Before, in your workspace, you could only do panels, you could do menus, and now you get a third option. You get the ability to do toolbars. So before we make that workspace, let's go up to the edit menu. Let's come down to toolbar, and this is one of my, Photoshop adds a lot of things along the way with CC, but this is one of my definitely all-time favorites, is now I have the ability to customize for the first time the Photoshop tool panel, meaning getting rid of tools I don't use for a particular task and reprioritizing the tools I use, moving the ones I need up to the top, getting rid of the ones I don't use, or moving the ones less frequently used to the bottom. So for example, 3D material eyedropper. Don't use that in retouching. So let's get rid of that. Let's throw that in the extra tool space. Color sampler tool, don't use that. Don't use the ruler. Don't use the note tool for this. And again, we're just talking about I'm setting up for retouching. So I'm getting the things out of there that I don't use. I'll worry about the categories in a moment. Don't use the pattern stamp tool. Don't use the art history brush. So just throwing tools off to the side, like putting them in a drawer that I don't use. Those I might use, those, I'll probably never use the paint bucket tool anymore. Don't use that one. So just making that Photoshop panel, tool panel simpler. All right. And yeah, I might use rotate view on my Cintiq. Okay. So now that I got just kind of got rid of some low-hanging fruit, some of the ones I definitely don't use, like these, when I'm retouching. Now the thing is, okay, what do I use? Like, what do I use the most? Well, I definitely use the spot healing brush the most. Now you notice the spot healing brush is located over here, and it's buried under like 4 tools. There's the 5 tools. Spot healing brush, patch tool, content aware, red eye tool. So those are all a group, and I always have to either use the Shift J to cycle through them or click over there and pull one out. Well, I use the spot healing brush so much that I want it to stand alone, and I want it to be closer to the top. So now it's right under the move tool. And by the way, when I'm retouching, I don't use the art brush tool either. All right, so next, I use the patch tool a lot. So I want that one not to be in a group. I want it to stand alone. So now I got the move tool, healing brush, and patch tool separated. All about the ones I need. All right, and thank you. Bruno, what did I forget? All right, so anyway, yeah, I'll probably use the crop tool. Move that up near the top. Definitely crop when I'm retouching. Now, again, these other tools will be here, but I'm just saying, okay, which ones are the priorities? Which ones do I use the most? Definitely use the brush tool. Let's move that one up. I'm probably use the brush tool more than I use the crop tool when I'm retouching. And again, I could go on, but let's say that this is it for now. All right, so I've rearranged this tool panel to my liking, and I'm now going to, before I click done, I want to go ahead and save it. as a preset just so I have it saved off to the side. I'm going to call it retouching. So now that means I can load it onto other computers. Now that I've gone ahead and done this work, I'm going to go ahead and hit done. And now we can go make that custom workspace, new workspace, and we're going to call it retouching. It's very important that you also check off the things that when you switch to retouching, that it switches. So I definitely want it to switch to my new toolbar. And any menu items I've changed, and any keyboard shortcuts I've changed, I want it to switch all of those things when I customize the toolbar. One of the menus, it's the right side. Forgot to close one. Okay, all right, let's hit save. And now that I've got that there, I've now got a retouching workspace that we're on. So now if I switch to one of the other workspaces, what I want you to do is pay attention to the tool panel. Keep in mind, we've got move tool, healing brush, patch tool, paintbrush. But when I switch to a different workspace like Essentials, the tools change back to their defaults. So you can literally have a set of custom tools for every single thing you do. If you do retouching, if you do digital painting, if you do graphic design, if you do medical work, if you do legal work, whatever it is, legal forensic work, whatever it is, you can have just the tools, just the panels, just the whatever it is that you need whenever you want by maximizing your use of workspaces. And now that workspaces can account for tools, when I switch to retouching, I get my retouching tool panel just the way I want. All right, if you're working on a nice big display, here's another one, then having a nice long tool panel is great. If you're working on a small laptop, let's say you're on the go and you're working on a 13-inch display and you're running out of real estate, then one of the old-time ways of using Photoshop, or I shouldn't say old-time, but one of the historic ways of using Photoshop is with the double-sided or double-column tool panel. All I did was I just clicked on these little double arrows up here. These little double arrows will take Photoshop back to its predecessor days of like Photoshop 3, 4, 5, probably even 6. All had this double-column tool panel. It doesn't change anything of what's in it. It just simply switches, instead of it being all one long column, it just cuts it off at a certain point and then moves the rest to the second column. So there you go. Now the other thing while we're here is that your tool panel and your panels don't have to stay where they are. Not only will the workspace take into account what's there, but it'll also take into account position. So you can yank your tool panel off, you can yank any panel off, and if you have a second display, you can customize Photoshop by putting all the panels, or the ones you don't need, or the ones that are covering up things, on that other display. I usually keep the tools handy. Over there on the left is where I'm used to, but some people I know put them on the right for whatever reason. Or they put, instead of having to go back and forth from tools to panels, they put everything on one side. So that is, of course, totally up to you. While we're also talking about interface changes, let's go up to the Chris Garcia 6. I am doing good. How are you? Let's go back to the Photoshop preferences again, and let's go to interface. And in interface, we all cheered for joy when Photoshop finally got the new dark UI, which most people, if you're new, this is all you've ever seen. But if you've been around for a while, Photoshop used to be a lot lighter. Not only can Photoshop have this dark gray UI, but it could also go back to the lighter one or even darker. So for example, it takes a second for these to kick in. And I mean a second. When I did this earlier, it was taking like a really long time. So if I need a really light interface for whatever reason, or lighter is easier on your eyes, you can switch to the lighter interface, and all the panels and everything will adjust. All the icons will adjust accordingly. Or if the gray isn't dark enough, you can go to a darker, totally black UI. And the reason why most people prefer these darker user interfaces in their applications is because it makes your eyes focus on your work, your content, instead of the bright user interface that's surrounding it. That's probably the best way to explain it. Okay, so I've got the Interface color change. Let me see. Let me look at my notes real quick. Make sure I'm not missing anything. We did that. We did that. Oh, we didn't do that one. All right. So let me. I'll leave it on a dark one for now. Let's click OK. Let's put the layers panel back where it goes. And oh, actually, let me tear one of these off. Let's see adjustments, for example. We're also used to docking panels on the left or the right, but there's another way to dock a panel. And you've had one down there for a while. It was the timeline. I also just earlier stuck paragraph down there too, but you can also dock panels to the bottom of your display or bottom of the screen. And just, oh, you can't see it. Hold on. Let me adjust Photoshop so where you can see it. Dun, dun, dun. Move that up a bit. There we go. Now you can see it. And it's over there. So right here are two panels, timeline and paragraph. So if I want to dock another panel down there, I can. So for example, I can take the adjustments panel and dock it to the bottom. There you go. Now you can see the blue line. And when I dock it down there, it's down there. I'm going to move this up, scoot this up just a little bit more. There we go. And so that just simply means if you want that panel, you click, it pops up or down. So for things that you have a lot of, where you've got, of course, your screen is always wide, usually wider than it is taller. You can maybe get more real estate out of putting those panels with a ton of things down there on the bottom instead of having it down the side, because you end up having to scroll it down the side a lot. One of the panels I'm interested to see how it would look down there. Let me try it. So this will be my first time trying this particular panel in this spot. Here, let me move paragraph out of there too. All right, I'm going to try putting a panel down there that I've never tried before. I just want to see what happens. I'm going to move the CC Libraries panel down there because it tends to have a lot of stuff in it. And I want to see, does it go wide when you do that? It does. Oh, it does. I was going to say it does not. I was going to be disappointed. It does. So that way I get to scroll all my stock or library items like a film strip, or basically like a nice wide panel that shows me more stuff. So that's kind of cool because that lets me see a lot more without having to scroll down as much. I can see more wide. Maybe I can't. I don't know, but it feels like I can. All right, and again, to collapse that panel, just double click, and that panel's still there, but whenever you need it, double click or click to bring it up. And now you can scroll through that panel and see a lot more content that way. I don't know. I might keep it down there. We'll see. Okay. We did. Oh, there's another one. Let's do that one. And we got like two more. Okay, so let's do this one. We've got this one document open with multiple layers. Let me go back to the libraries panel. Let's open up a couple more documents. Let's open up this one. So I'm opening up a separate document. And let's open up one more Eclipse photo. And these are from Adobe stock. But anyway, let's make these nice and big. So hit Command 0 to make those big. The view big at least. Command 0, make the view bigger. And that one's already pretty big. Command 0, make it a little bit bigger. Okay, so now we got 3 documents open. And what people that are new, this is the way it's always worked. You've had your documents in tabs, and you just click to click to go between the tabs. In the earlier versions of Photoshop, there was actually an icon on the control panel that would let you control that view. That icon isn't there, but the functionality still is. You can go under the window menu under Arrange, and you can tile your documents any way you want. So for example, I can tile them all vertically. So now I've got my 3 documents. They are still there. I can work on the individual panels, but now I can see them side by side. So again, for a nice big display, having them open side by side in one click might help you work faster. And of course, you can also do that to where they're, instead of being arranged vertically, you can tile them horizontally. So again, that doesn't work too well for these three, but if they were, if I had a tall monitor, excuse me, that would help. And you can also, let's see, if I do 2 up vertical, what does that do? So 2 up vertical just says I'm going to only put 2 of these vertical, but you still have the other document tab if you need to get to it. So the other documents are in tabs. And this is, again, great when you're trying to compare side by side between 2 different documents. Now, you can always go old school. You can always just simply tear the document off the tabs and work with them as separate windows, kind of the old, back in the old Mac days, that when Photoshop was only on the Mac, or when it was Mac and Windows, but not really taking advantage of the application frame, you had the ability to work with these separate documents. Speaking of application frame, that brings up another one. Anytime you want to get back to these, you can always go in and under Arrange and consolidate all to tabs. In other words, oh no, it got too unwieldy. Put it all back into tabs the way I like. Now, speaking of application frame, that is this option here. I don't believe that Windows users have this choice because you always had an application frame. In other words, you could never see through the application to the application behind it. But in the old Mac OS days, that's how all applications worked. You could always see through to the application that was behind it. So Photoshop and all the Adobe applications eventually introduced a feature called Application Frame to make the application a one-window application. So in other words, I can move the window around and all 3 documents will move around with it. But if I turn off the application frame, I love the application frame. I would never want to go back. But if I turn it off, this will literally put Photoshop back to the 90s, back to the way it used to be, where I can see the desktop behind these documents. I still got Photoshop in the foreground, but now everything is a separate window. There are no tabs, and whatever application is in the background, I would be able to get to it. Again, I would never want to go back to that. I love the application frame. I love being able to move one thing and it moves everything, but now I can't just move the Photoshop window anymore and move everything. So let me quickly get back to application frame, turn it all back on, and now I've got one window for everything that I can move around. Without the application frame, you don't get the ability to do that. All right. Last but not least, if you are doing something that takes a while, like in other words, you're going to get a progress bar because you're running a filter, or you're doing an export, or you're doing a render, 3D render of some kind, and you're going to get a progress bar and it's going to take a while. Right now, the way it defaults is you would not know that it was done unless you look to see, is it done? Is the progress bar finished? But there is a preference. If you go to your preferences, I believe it's under interface. I could be wrong. Maybe it's under general. Probably under general. There it is. It's under general. It is beep when done. In other words, Photoshop can alert you after a command is completed or after something is done. Most people will not want that. But if you're in the habit of doing things that take a while, then you may want, and you're going to stick Photoshop in the background, let it cook, you may want to be notified when it's done. It is off by default for a good reason, but I just had to point out that it is there in case people wanted to be able to do it. Okay, so I think I've given you enough to go play with today. Maybe we'll do a part 2 of this, and we'll go deeper into what you can and can't do with the interface. Someone's asking about tab is better for full screen than F. Yeah, okay, so let me talk about that. If you hit this is an old one, if you hit the tab key, that will turn off all the panels temporarily. Hitting the tab key again will turn them back on. What I normally do is hit the tab key and go F, F. So that way I get rid of everything and now I just see the document. So tab brings back the panels, and full screen is the letter F. That, well, first of all, it gets rid of the control panel, then F again gets rid of all the menus. And if you want the interface back, you can always hit tab again to bring it back. So tab simply brings out the panels and hides the panels. F cycles through 3 cycles. So F shows everything the first time, gets rid of the control panel the second time, gets rid of everything the third time. So just, that's an old one. That's been around for years. All right. And I'm glad you brought that up. Who was that brought up the full screen or tab? I saw it there a second ago. Beetlejuice is in the house. I see everyone giving him a shout out. There's Jason. Hey, Jason, what's going on, man? We're just about to finish. You're just in time to say goodbye. All right. Let me see. Let's see if I missed anything. Great. All right. Okay. So, guys, want to thank you for joining me for today's visit through the Photoshop interface and ways to customize it. It is Friday, so happy Friday, happy weekend for those of you who get a weekend or get to play or get to do things outside of work. Next week, speaking of Beetlejuice, Jason Levine's in the house on YouTube. Jason will be hosting the 3-day stream on video, motion graphics, video, audio, everything that moves, basically. And you can check that out starting Tuesday, I believe, at 9 a.m. Pacific time, that is, at adobelive.com. So adobelive.com, you can check out the 3 days of motion design, video, editing, all things video and all things audio. So that starts on Tuesday, goes from Tuesday all day, 9 to 5, Wednesday 9 to 5, Thursday 9 to 5. Pacific time, adobelive.com. If you head to adobelive.com as soon as we're done here, you can go check out the lineup of who's going to be on for those 3 days. I know Jason will be working part of those days, at least hosting, and never knew about the color labels. You're welcome, Jan. Color menu items, that is. You're welcome. Yeah, that's one that I didn't know about for a while. So that I didn't learn that one until recently. I think Victoria was the one that showed me that one. So I was like, wait a minute, how did you get your file menu to have a green save in it? I was like, so I learn things every day. So with that said, take care, guys. Everybody, have a great weekend. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next one. Bye.